Embattled New York City Mayor Eric Adams isn't off the hook just yet, despite the Trump DOJ's best efforts to put the rule of law in the woodchipper on his behalf. Today, Judge Dale Ho, who is presiding over Eric Adams' corruption case, ruled that the case should continue for now. He appointed an outside lawyer named Paul Clement to argue before his court over the Trump DOJ's request to have the charges against Eric Adams dismissed. In his order, Judge Ho writes that because both the Department of Justice and Mayor Eric Adams have sought to have the case dismissed, quote, there has been no adversarial testing of the government's position generally or the form of its requested relief. Clement is a prominent conservative lawyer. He served as U.S. Solicitor General during George W. Bush's administration. Judge Ho has ordered that briefs be submitted by March 7th. Joining me in Basel, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin and former top prosecutor at the DOJ, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman. So, Lisa, who is Paul Clement?
Paul Clement, as you just noted, is the former Solicitor General, but also, Nicole, one of the best-known Supreme Court advocates in the country. And he's sort of been involved in a situation like this before. As Judge Ho notes in his order, he was appointed by the Supreme Court as a friend of the court to stand in the shoes of the Department of Justice when the first Trump administration decided it no longer wanted to take the same position with respect to the structure of the CFPB. There was a lawsuit challenging whether the structure of the CFPB was constitutional. Originally, DOJ said it was, and then Trump came into office and said it wasn't. And somebody needed to make that argument that, in fact, it was constitutional. That's when the Supreme Court said, hey, Paul Clement, want to stand in the shoes of the previous administration and be the Department of Justice. So he's done this before. No, he did not win. But Paul Clement has won a lot of Supreme Court cases. If I were before the Supreme Court as a client and I was thinking about who I would want to hire, in addition to our friend Neil Katyal, Paul Clement would be at the top of my list, or any list that I would recommend to somebody who needs to be before the court. He is a very, very serious lawyer. And also, as you noted, somebody not known for sharing the politics of those that this administration has criticized, including Damian Williams, who is the former U.S. attorney, who they have said was politically biased in bringing this case against Eric Adams.
I think what Lisa's saying diplomatically is that he's a conservative Republican, not a Democratic.
And a real conservative Republican.
Super duper. I think always shortlisted for the Supreme Court. I think any of the seats held by Alito or Roberts or Kavanaugh or Gorsuch could have been probably filled by Mr. Clement. But what is the job really that he's been asked to do?
The simple way to understand it is basically the court saying, you know what, I'm used to an adversarial process and hearing from both sides. There are not both sides now. All I'm hearing from is the government and the defense that are aligned. That's very, very rare. And the only time I can really think of it in this kind of situation where the government's saying, I want to dismiss a criminal case is, guess what? Trump 1.0. It's Michael Flynn, where Judge Sullivan in D.C. did exactly the same thing, which is appointed an outside, respected person to give the other point of view. It doesn't mean that person is going to prevail, but the judge, I think, is being very responsible. Let's play this out. Because the real issue is, okay, great. I got the legal niceties that there are people on both sides now that will be heard. I think that the judge really has to hold a factual hearing, not just having people argue, but actually say, I need to have people under oath say what happened. And this is why I think that has to happen.
But what does Paul Clement do? Does he call Danielle Sassoon, or does he go sit with Emil Bove? What does he do? I
think he says to the court, here's what I think the law is. And in order for you to resolve this legally, you need to have a factual record. And this is why. The government says there's no quid pro quo at all. And even if there is, it doesn't matter. And I think Paul Clement has to say, what are you talking about? That if there is a quid pro quo, such as, and I've given this example before, let's assume that they had indicted a Democratic politician in Congress, and they said, the government had said, you know what, we're going to dismiss the case and keep it in abeyance if you vote the right way. And we're just going to let it sit there. Or here's another example. You pay me $50,000 in cash every month. You keep paying me? Guess what? I don't think this case is going to appear. Those are quid pro quos, and so that clearly is illegal. So I think the argument for Paul Clement is you need to know, Judge, what are you being asked to bless here? Is it an illegal quid pro quo, or is this something different? And I know you've heard from one side that it's fine, but you need to make a factual judgment.
Are there legal quid pro? I mean, you've got Tom Homan going on TV saying that he will be, quote, up his butt if Eric Adams doesn't do what he tells him. I mean, is that evidence of a quid pro quo?
That is evidence that can be used. I have a slightly more nuanced view than I think most people talking about this. I do think there are legal quid pro quos. Here's a perfect example, cooperation agreements. The government very often says, you want to cooperate, you agree to tell the truth in proceedings. We agree if you do that, we will write to the judge that you've been truthful. All of that is above board. It's all in writing. It's something that the judge can see. And that's a valid criminal justice concern. My other hypothetical of getting $50,000 in cash or coercing somebody to vote a certain way, that's illegal in my view. And so that's why I think the judge has to have a factual hearing here. And your point is, we've kind of seen it on TV working.